Welcome back to American Agenda. I'm Heather Childers. Bob Sellers is off today. President Biden, earlier this afternoon during our show, he signed a bill to boost the Crime Victims Fund. But there was one part of his remarks that struck us as a little eerie. Listen to this.
According to the CDC, and I think Senator Feinstein remembers, I got in trouble because when I was pushing the legislation way back in those days, I said, I'm convinced that women who are victims of domestic violence suffer from post-traumatic stress, no different than a soldier being shot at regularly. You come home, and every time your significant other would come home, if dinner wasn't ready and you smashed your head against the wall, there's no difference in being shot at. And the CDC 2 years later came out and said survivors can experience mental health problems and such depression and symptoms of post-traumatic stress syndrome.
So, Stacy, I'll start with you there. I'm not sure what point he was trying to make there. If he was trying to justify someone coming home and the dinner's late, so he bangs your head into the wall because of PTSD, I'm not sure. So you take it.
Well, okay, so sometimes, Heather, it's not really fair for us to have to analyze what he said because we can't really tell what he's talking about. But I assume that if he's referring to PTSD, that would be service members returning from active duty. A lot of our service members suffer from PTSD after multiple back-to-back deployments in the Middle East. But in any case, we need good, sound public policy. And some of that can be influenced by the White House and what he's doing there. But I just wonder what kind of policy do we need to help him? What can we do to help the President of the United States with his coherence in his public speaking engagements? And why are we discussing it, Heather, you and I, and our esteemed panel here, instead of his wife, Jill Biden, who she calls herself a doctor. I know she has a PhD, but, work with me here. You have Kamala Harris. We have powerful people in the White House who should be addressing this issue, and they're not. And it's just a dereliction of duty that will go down in the history books as one of the biggest scandals of our lifetime, that Joe Biden was allowed to be the president of the United States and make public appearances while suffering from dementia, and nobody did anything about it.
And Dennis, it's doing a disservice to the issues that he's talking about. And, he was signing this into law today in terms of additional funding and funding that's supposed to go to victims of crime. But here, this is what we're talking about because we can't even understand the point that he's trying to make.
It was an absolute disconnect, unfortunately, and I think, as Stacy points out, this has become a trend or a pattern for this president to just go off on tangents without a coherent thought. And it's very disturbing, it's very painful, and I feel for him, but as a nation that is led by a president, we need to make sure that we have somebody who is not only rallying us and trying to build consensus, but is also trying to lead us in a direction with some sense of coherency. Yeah. At the bill signing, I'm very concerned because of the crime surge that we're trying to address, and it just seems like we have to just keep passing more and more laws, and that's going to take it's not going to help us. We've got to have enforcement. We've got to make sure that we have responsible people doing responsible things, that we support law enforcement, that we support mental health. This is a community-based approach to trying to resolve a serious issue in crime surge that has happened since this president has been in office.
And at the very least, you have to face the reality of what is going on. And we've all seen the numbers when it comes to the increase in crime. But if you listen to what the president had to say last night, he said that's not the case. Listen.
As you know, because you're so involved, actually, crime is down. Gun violence and murder rates are up. Guns. I'm the only guy that ever got passed legislation when I was a senator to make sure we eliminated assault weapons. I'm continuing to push to eliminate the sale of those things, but I'm not likely to get that done in the near term.
David, your thoughts?
Well, one of the biggest stories of the 90s is that every city center in the United States became markedly safer and cleaner. And unfortunately, these days, we're starting to go backwards. So I'm less concerned with the specific policies and more concerned with these long-term trends. And really, it's fundamentally urban populations that suffer from this insecurity. And it has a high economic cost and a human cost. So I want to make sure that our leaders are aware that this is something that concerns all Americans, regardless of where they live, because we all remember when New York and Los Angeles and Chicago were rough places to go to, and they've since gotten a lot better, and we definitely don't want to go backwards.
I don't know. Here in New York, I've got to say, I've never been afraid to walk down the street in the, 11 or so years that I've lived here, but you see a dramatic difference in the streets here in New York in terms of what's happening. And it's not just gun violence. Look at this. This right here, that was video taken on a New York City subway just, 2 days ago, I think is when this happened. The gentleman just walks up behind that woman randomly and hits her in the head, knocks her out. So that doesn't involve a gun, Dennis?
No, it doesn't. But again, you know what it involves? It involves a lack of respect and support for law enforcement. Again, laws are made for the lawbreakers. And we've got to be able to have some sense of respect, some sense of support for law enforcement. And we need to make sure that we don't have prosecutorial discretion that keeps people from being, recidivists, and that they don't ever get prosecuted because some prosecutor just wants to let them out. We've got to enforce the laws that are on the books and have support for those that are out there doing that in our law enforcement community.
Yeah, and Stacy, that was another piece of video that we actually aired today. These two gentlemen that were just walking out of a store, I think it was in LA, with just, armfuls of merchandise, because ultimately they know that they won't be charged. They're not going to face any penalty at all.
So we have these Soros prosecutors who've now embedded themselves. They've kind of dug themselves in, and they're the ones driving this new. It's like a new routine for us, a new norm, which is shoplifting up to $1,000 or $1,500 in some municipalities. Some areas are the
there it is. Yeah, there's the video.
Yeah. So this is not because of anything that the criminals have done. It's prosecutorial discretion, where they're deciding not to prosecute people who are stealing up to a certain dollar amount. That has to stop. We have to stop telling people it's normal to be vagrants, to live homeless on the sidewalks. We have to stop normalizing property theft, property damage, and the bastardization of our right to protest into the right to riot, loot, burn, and destroy. And these are things that can happen at the local level. You have to take 150 of your good friends to the city council meeting and start calling these people out and telling them, just because it's not happening in your neighborhood doesn't mean it's not something that's impacting us negatively. And we're going to remember you at the ballot box the next time unless you bring us some law and order. Yeah. This is something that we handle at the local level.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Stand by, though, because coming up, we're going to talk about this topic. Would you let your child under the age of 18 undergo gender reassignment treatments? We're talking about that up next.